The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning into another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about transgendered people. On one particular instance coming out of the United Kingdom, it's a newer story in the news cycle, and it is in regards to a gentleman, Mr. Bryson, who was convicted of rape and is now being sentenced and put into a woman's jail. So we're going to go over the story. If you haven't heard about it now, it's a great headline originally reported in The Sun, with two words that are pretty strange to be put together. Her penis. It's not the first time that we've seen the words her penis. Still very odd to see. Going back to October 24th, 2022, where a transgendered singer strips on live TV showing her penis and plays a piano, or attempts to play at the piano. Now let's see what the legacy media or mainstream media has to say about this particular situation. So this is from the BBC, and the headline is, "What is the transgender prisoner row all about?" Row being an argument. In England, you'd say that one is having a row. So for our North American viewers, to translate, I guess we could say, is what is the transgender prisoner fiasco all about? A transgendered woman has been convicted of raping two women in attacks carried out before she changed gender. Isla Bryson is now in custody and facing a lengthy jail term, but where she should serve that sentence is the subject of a heated debate. It has led to concerns about the safety of any women alongside Bryson in a female prison. The Scottish Prison Service says the decision on where transgender prisoners are housed is taken on a case-by-case basis after appropriate risk assessment. Bryson, 31, who was found guilty of 2 counts of rape at the High Court in Glasgow on Tuesday, he committed crimes in the Clydebank in Glasgow in 2016 and 2019, while known as a man called Adam Graham. It is thought to be the first time a trans woman has been convicted of raping women in Scotland. Bryson made the decision to transform from a man to a woman while awaiting trial. That's key information right there. So he did the attacks, raped these women, and then when he got caught, I'm a woman now. I'm transitioning to be a woman. Following his conviction, Judge Lord Scott warned Bryson that a, quote, significant custodial sentence was inevitable. It is understood that he is currently being held in Corton Vale Women's Prison in Stirling, where he is likely to be kept apart from other inmates before being sentenced in February. Bryson is one of the relatively few trans prisoners in Scotland. According to the latest Scottish Prison Service statistics, there were 11 trans women, 4 trans men, and 3 non-binary or gendered fluid prisoners between July and September of 2022. There were a total of 7,092 male prisoners and 280 female prisoners, and they used the term inmates. By comparison, in England and Wales, there were 230 trans prisoners at the time, last count on the 31st of March 2022. Of the 49 transgender prisoners in the female prisons, 6 were trans women, and of the 181 in the male estate, 162 were trans women. Other high-profile transgender prisoners in Scotland have included Katie Dole Tulowski, a 22-year-old trans woman who was held in Cortonvale last year after breaching a restriction of liberty order. In 2018, he sexually assaulted a 10-year-old girl in a supermarket in the bathrooms and filmed a 12-year-old girl on the toilet at a separate supermarket. The prison service says the decision on where to house trans prisoners is taken on a case-by-case basis. Fiona Cruikshank, the head of the Prison Services Public Protection Unit, told BBC Scotland that it considers the risk posed by and to the individual prisoner. They are balanced with consideration for the safety and well-being of other inmates and staff. If we think an individual poses particular risks or there's a particular risk to them, then we have the opportunity to remove them and keep them separated until such times a decision is made on how we best manage that risk, she said. Segregating prisoners can affect their mental health and well-being, so they always aim to integrate them back into the mainstream population. In the case of transgendered prisoners, it would happen slowly with robust risk management, close monitoring and supervision, and case conferences, Miss Cruikshank said. There would always be the option to put the prisoner back into full-time segregation, she said. And she confirmed that one result of a risk assessment could be the decision that it was not possible to house a trans woman in the female prison estate. Justice Secretary Keith Brown said he was confident in the prison's service ability to minimize the risk. The facts of the matter are that the Scottish Prison Service has a long track record, I'm talking 20 years or more, of assessing risks within our prisons, including those presented by the presence of trans prisoners, both for the trans prisoners themselves and other prisoners, he said. They don't do this work quickly. They do it over a period of time involving lots of different organizations. They do a full risk assessment and they take decisions based on that. He said the Bryson case was not connected to the recent gender recognition reform bill, which has not yet been enacted and has been blocked from becoming law by the UK government. During the debate on the bill, there were attempts to bar sex offenders from changing their legal sex by obtaining a gender recognition certificate. However, those amendments were defeated. Under the terms of the bill, which was passed, anyone subject to a sexual harm prevention order or sexual offense prevention order would not be allowed to seek the particular certificate. However, SNP MP Jonah Cherry said Bryson should be moved to a men's prison. Quote, to many people, it will look like this convicted rapist has gamed the system in order to try and garner sympathy and end up in a woman's prison, she told Times Radio. And I think a lot of people will be shocked by that. She said she was very concerned about the safety of the women's prisoners. Campaigners have warned that female inmates are extremely vulnerable. Kate Coleman, director of Keep Prisons Single Sex, said many have been diagnosed with mental health problems and were likely to have experienced domestic abuse and sexual violence by men. She said the crimes that they commit, which lead to them being in prison, are often bound up with the domestic relationships with the men in their lives. In prison, she fears that these women are literally a captive audience for transgender inmates. But as well as the threat of sexual and physical violence, she is concerned about the psychological impact of vulnerable female prisoners. Rape Crisis Scotland has also spoken out against any move to place people convicted of rape in a women's prison. In a tweet, the organization said rape is an extremely serious offense. In deciding where to place any convicted sex offender, the priority must be the safety of other women prisoners. It is not appropriate for someone convicted of any serious sexual offense to be placed within the general female population. So what say you? A man decides to sexually assault several women, decides to change his gender and hoping to go to a female prison? Or was he looking to change to become a female in a man's prison? Either way, if he decided to become a female, and he would have said, no, I decided to become a female, but I'll accept my punishment as a man. That's who I was, and that's the crime that I was. So stick me in the male prison. It was not fair for the women that I violated, and so I'm guilty of that offense. Throw me in the male prison. I accept my fate at that point. But no, that conversation didn't occur. I'm a woman, so I should be put in a woman's prison. Also, too, it is expected that the gender reassignment surgery is to be paid for by the taxpayers. So even though this person has sexually assaulted women, has a past for it, therefore being put into a prison full of women with very minimal security, it would be a great place for an individual of that perverted and deluded mindset. It's nice to see some politicians standing up and saying, no, sexual crimes, you can go somewhere else and go into a different prison. Now, it's quite clear that these conversations will have to come out. The transgender movement is not stepping down. It will not be silenced. It's quite clear that politicians are happy to allow this to happen. The medical community is happy to allow this to happen. The big pharmaceutical companies are happy to allow this to happen because everybody's making money. It's more money that you can possibly make. So in a society that's become so corrupted with greed, and this is not a endorsement for socialism or communism, the Western society has become so profit-driven and will look to exploit any means necessary for more money and more consumerism. No one's backing down off the transgender issue. So how do we deal with this going forward? Would the simple solution be build a transgender prison? And if you're a transgender woman or a transgendered man, you go to said prison? Treat them completely separate? Or do we just let all the genders live together in one giant prison system and not have to worry about segregation or population, and men and women would all share the same space in jail? Or do we do what I'm sure that the wonderful Jagmeet Singh would do and just say there are no prisons and let everyone be free and crime doesn't exist and they all need mental health issues and we should all be treated that way? We'd love to hear your opinion on this particular topic. It is definitely a polarizing subject to discuss. There's a lot of heated emotion, and especially if you decide to brave yourself on the social media platforms, good luck with having that conversation in a rational manner. I'd like to thank you for tuning in this week. I've been your host, Hollis Grant. You've been listening to The Fact Is. Hope to see you next week. Have yourself a wonderful week. Thank you.
Dun, 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 dun.
Salsa shark. We're going to need a bigger boat. Throughout history, they have been a part of our Canadian life. Men and women who have made their mission to entertain their fellow man. They've worked hard enough. Isn't it time they had their own podcast?
You're right, it's Canada. This podcast would be great if it wasn't for the internet trolls.
I don't bother them and they don't bother me.
I could do without the bad reviews in the iTunes store.
You have that podcast with that guy who was at that Comic-Con in the last year?
You should hear the barrage of the stupid questions I get on our SoundCloud account.
What do you mean it was coughing? How am I going to hear a podcast with coughing?
You feel a lot better if you just rip into the occasional guest.
You're a host who doesn't get paid. You can't just do anything you want while you're recording.
What kind of podcast are you running here anyways?
Droids Canada Podcast present.
You think anyone can see us down here?
Why, you think you want to have sex or something?
Can we?
Droids Canada podcast, the only show to rip off a Clerks trailer.
You hate people! But I love Comic-Cons. Isn't it ironic?